Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The roll call show that board member David Stramberg and Chad Young are absent. Did we have any citizen comments on the sheet back there?
We do not.
Okay. Then we'll move on to school board member committee reports. How would we start with Jim?
Just finished a policy committee and not many changes.
Thank you. John?
Policy.
Sue?
We finished policy. This round of policy is pretty much related to finance, and there'll be, first reading will be on the next board meeting, and then the summary of those changes will be there.
Okay.
And then I also attended a C executive board meeting, and preparing for our next general meeting, which is Friday, which will be in person in probably the first time in 2 years.
Oh,
So
wow.
it will be fun to network with superintendents and other board members. Because you don't do that on Zoom. You just don't talk about those things. So our executive board meeting was in person as well, but most people chose. Yeah. Yep.
All right, thank you. Eric?
No.
I had a couple referendum committee, communication committee meetings, agenda planning, and then I did attend the coffee and conversation too with Ben, and Sue was there also. And we have student council representative tonight. Welcome.
Thank you.
What was your name?
Dylan
Dylan.
Dylan, how do you say your last name?
Fady.
Fady. Okay, so we're excited to have Dylan with us. I had an opportunity to visit with Dylan on the phone. Was it Friday afternoon?
I believe it was.
Yeah, and gave him his first introduction, a little bit of a crash course on the role of a school board, and still hoping to, sit down with Dylan some more to go over kind of the phase one overview, if you will. And also Dylan was kind enough to be able to set up and broker a meeting with me and the high school student council, which is this Friday, that I'll be able to connect with them to get some student voice to the superintendent, and also be able to share a little bit with them about our upcoming referendum, just so they're informed with that. So Dylan, now is your opportunity to give the board an update on everything that's happening in the high school and the student council.
All right, so basically what we're up to right now is we're making plans for our homecoming. Everything is running pretty smoothly. I'm in the Pet Fest committee myself, so we just talked about the traveling and the high school Pet Fest. So I got in contact with the other schools about that, and they were thinking we could do some sort of drive-by instead of the usual show up to the gym. We were thinking we might be able to also do some sort of online recording, something like that. So yeah, that's it really in general.
All right, thank you, and welcome again.
Thank you.
Ben, superintendent report.
Hey, it's we're in week 3 of school, and we're every single day, we're just so thankful to have all of our students and staff back in person every day, full well knowing that there's still places across the country that they're unfortunately not in session. I think the big elephant in the room always, and the thing that I get communications on quite often, is our response to COVID-19. And I wanted the board to know, and I've sent you some documents on our tracking system. We track things. I feel like we have a very sophisticated system of tracking, where when we do have a typical parent call their child in for any kind of illness, we're able to collect that data and have real-time information on day-to-day on students that are out with influenza-like illnesses. Typically with fevers over 101, that kind of a thing. And also positive COVID-19. So we're tracking that on a day-to-day basis. And we do have a dashboard up on our website so people can see that, and we're transparent. There's still some bugs that we need to continue to work out that we learn about as we go, but we're committed to continually improve on that. We have had some small outbreaks in our district. When I mean an outbreak, typically in a school, we would talk about 5% or more. We haven't come close to that, thankfully. We have had a classroom that we've hit that we've had to work with families on some mitigation strategies to slow that down so that we can keep our students in school. Our number one goal is for our kids to be able to stay in school. The face covering is an optional thing, and we're committed to that. But we also know that if we get in danger of possibly having to close our doors, that we are willing to do anything to keep our kids in session, which would include that if need be. So it's just an everyday constant monitoring and adjusting as we go. And the reality is when I'm not talking about someone that's angry that we're not implementing face coverings, I'm talking with someone that's happy that we're doing what we're doing. And that seems to continually be a hot issue. And at the end of the day, we're here, all of our staff, 500 plus team members are here committed to make a difference in the lives of our students and educate them. And I'm just so thankful of the high quality staff that we have that are here every single day, working their tails out, man. Many of them working late into the evenings, and I'm thankful for that. And we've got a great start of the school year, but it's an interesting year. I mean, it's something that we've never experienced, and there's a lot of similarities to last year. So I mean, that is what it is. We just keep every day one foot in front of the next. I should make mention that we continue to try and get information out to our community on our referendum that's on November 2nd. I'm thankful that I had the opportunity to meet with the Lions Club last night. It was a really nice turnout there. I think I've now become a lion as a result of doing that.
I tell you, run a line.
Which they happen to
That was
meet,
gonna happen.
they happen to meet the first and third Monday of every month. And so that means that another evening. My wife will be very happy with me.
The secret knock to get it another week.
No, I don't,
It's a handshake.
but I'll have to learn their songs. There's still lots more communications and meetings that we hope to broker just to get the information out. I think it's just making sure that people know, exactly what is, part of this referendum and what's not. We just want people to have accurate information. So we're going to continue to plug away at that. Early voting has started, as you noticed. If you walked in that door, you would have seen our process. It's as easy peasy as it gets. You roll up, you park, you walk in the door, you're greeted by a staff member. They will provide you a form, an absentee ballot form. You fill it out and then you hand it in to them, and then they'll give you a ballot, and then you can vote early. So, we've started that. We haven't had a huge turnout by any means, but it's only our third day of doing that. I'm excited to have teaching and learning here and the middle school here tonight, and other folks to talk about other things besides operational kinds of things, and really be able to focus on why we're here, and that's student learning. So I'll end my remarks unless the board has any questions for me.
Anybody have any questions for Ben? All right, thank you. All right, we'll move on to item 6, approve the agenda. Would somebody like to make a motion to approve the agenda for tonight?
Second,
Motion's been made by Eric, seconded by
Jim,
Jim.
sorry, Tom Jimsky, could be Tom.
Any comments or questions before we vote? All right, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Agenda is approved. Item 7, discuss and act on previous minutes from September 7th. Somebody like to make a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Motion's been made by Sue. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Don. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed? Minutes are approved. Item number 8, consent agenda. Would somebody like to make a motion to approve the consent?
So moved.
Motion's been made by Jim. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Eric. Any comments or questions on the consent? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed? All right, consent agenda is approved. We are on our first item of information, middle school updates. Charlie.
All right. I think we're gonna get my presentation up on the screen here that go through things. And while we're doing that, I want to just take the time to thank the board for having
Just
me
wait,
today. In echo.
You're in stereo.
Okay, I think I got it figured out. I got my computer muted, so you're gonna be good. So I'm sorry, start over.
It's okay. It's okay. Just again, thanks for having me. I'm Charlie Bacher, I'm the middle school principal, and I'm very grateful to be here in person as well. I think last year, my first impression on the board was coming from a Zoom from my bedroom while my dogs were trying to get in the door. It was just kind of, one of those memories I have of last year and just some of the bizarre things that happened as we did our best to continue to carry on with our school year. And I was really grateful to our staff for all they did last year, but also for the support we received from everyone from the school board, superintendent, district office, to our families within the community to make that happen. It was an experience that we look back on, and we're still, navigating those waters, but it's been incredible to really see it take shape. The school year, we're really excited to begin. And I guess the thing that we've seen so far in this first slide, again, our building as it pertains when we talk about the continuous improvement plan, our staff has really done a great job.
Press here, if you wanna go forward. Perfect.
Our staff's done a great job of really, embracing the improvement plan, and our Big Rocks committees have done a great job of planning from our student learning team who came in the summer to help set up trainings and get the year going, to our operations team who has really started to put in a number of different layers to how we operate day to day to provide some of the structures that I'm going to talk about here in the presentation that we've got going. And then our continued deepening of our use of the Princeton paradigm. Again, no surprises here with these two documents. So I won't spend a lot of time on them, but just the documents that really guide our practices. And when we look at the Infused Tiger Pride, social and emotional learning, one of the things I want to recognize that we go back to last year with is just the development and deepening of our TA curriculum, which really is focused on the social and emotional well-being of our students, and that every teacher, every day, for this year, 20 minutes, last year it was a little bit longer, with it being every other day, being a big part of how we kick off our day and get our students going on the right track, and really focused on building the relationships with those students that help along the way. One update that I'll share here, I've shared cohort growth, which is a little bit different. So when we look at last year's numbers, we were at 242 for 6th grade, 242 for 7th grade, 270 for 8th grade. So we had 270 students go on to the high school. We brought in 239. We projected last year at this time, at the end of the school year, we thought we were going to have about 228 coming to us. So while we were thinking that we were going to be down 42, that growth within each cohort, last year's, so that really indicates last year's fifth graders were at 228. You'll see that number's at 239. And just the growth within really nets us at a -16 when we were anticipating being at a -42. Some encouragement from those numbers as well. You'll see here some pictures from our web day. Want to continue to give credit to our web advisors and our 8th grade web leaders for really onboarding our kids. You can see the fun that they have. They have some thematic activities and really onboarding our 6th graders as they transition to middle school. And they had various costumes here. These were some quick photos that we got overall. We had, I think 236 of our 239 students participating that day. So that was a great way to get started with the school year. We'll start with just a little bit of trending in the data. I know that that's a small graphic there, so I apologize for that. When we look at, there's no data from 2020 because of COVID-19. We did see some dips as anticipated, and we're excited with the action steps that we've put into place to sort of offset some of the dips in learning that we have. And I'm going to speak to those a little bit more. So we're at 55%, just a little over 55% proficient in the area of reading, which is higher than the state average. Indicated, you can see the statewide average over on the left in blue, our Princeton school district overall in green, and then our middle school in blue there. And so strong work by our staff to continue to promote reading and build reading, even while regardless of where the models were last year. Math, you can see, took a steeper decline, and what we look at is a combination of a couple things with the instruction changing, as well as really, I think, more affected by our every other day schedule. Math is really, really important to have that daily schedule, daily math. When you have an hour and a half of math, it's tough to instruct throughout that time. So we definitely saw math and science take a little bit more of that hit from those aspects. And this year we've returned to a daily 45-minute schedule rather than a every other day hour and a half schedule. We really think that that's going to have a strong effect from an operations piece and how we schedule this year. So you can see again the comparables there with our middle school being lower in this area, and then you'll see in science similar with the proficiency rates and an area of focus there. Science also has had a curriculum reshuffle, and we're really excited about the new materials that we're using and the new science alignment and phenomenon-based curriculum that really is going to have a strong effect. And our science department has done a great job of setting a course for this year that's going to be exciting to follow that. Special education in the area of reading dipped as well similarly. And when we get to the goals, we do have a standard goal that it has been a pretty typical practice over the years, and looking back, about a 2% growth is our goal, but we look long-term as substantial growth being what we hope for. We believe very confidently that we will exceed those goals this year in increasing to 37% and 55% roughly in math and reading respectively. And a few of the things that we're doing for this year that have really put some pieces in place that we're excited about. In 6th grade, we have the development of an authentic literacy course, which is really digging into what is middle school level reading and writing. And those courses are unique to 6th grade students. We have staff sharing that responsibility, so it's done across different content areas. So it's going to grow our staff in the area of reading and writing instruction. And it also introduces to student, what do we expect at the middle school level for writing, and how can we help to grow that. We've also invested in some training and writing across the curriculum. Common strategy where we worked in collaboration with the high school last spring, and really got some great tools, and commend the high school for their collaboration with us in creating a 6-12 writing that we're very, very excited about. So that'll be something that we see taking shape. Also reading at Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3, some different school-wide focuses this year. One is in the area of word study. All staff will use word study prior to formalized reading assignments, and word study as kind of a recap of what that is for those of you who know, and for those of you who don't know, really looking at roots, prefixes, suffixes as a method to help students learn their own, develop strategies for learning vocabulary on the fly. And we believe that by incorporating word study using about 2 to 3 words that we help students break apart prior to it, it does 2 things. 1, builds vocabulary, and then 2, decreases the multitasking that you see struggling readers often do, which helps them to push through some of those frustration areas, and then build that second part, which we're focusing on at tier 2, which is fluency. And those 2 things really increase overall comprehension. So that dedication to those practices are going to be huge in our school. And then on the math side of things, we're fortunate enough to have math coaching at the 6th grade level, where we'll be working out with number sense through number talks to build literacy. And these are areas that are also, we believe, leverage the greatest growth, where some of the gaps that we think, or some of the gaps that we know are taking place due to lost learning last year, will really kickstart some of that growth. So those are some of the action step pieces that we're really excited about. And other focuses on our learning team, curriculum, continuing to really look at those key literacy-based essential standards. As I referenced earlier, the Princeton paradigm, authentic literacy. And then the next part that I'm going to talk about for a moment here is our broad experiences for students. When we look at what a middle school experience should be, the goal is always giving kids a number of different experiences that they can really explore their passions with. And we know that at that age, I think back on my own experience as a kid, learning about, for me, I didn't know that I was interested in music until middle school. So to be able to be in both band and choir, and I know that it was great for my mom. She couldn't get me to practice piano in the piano lesson. So then to see it suddenly become cool, where I was around kids that were doing that kind of thing, music has stayed a part of my own interest, and we have so many kids looking for those areas. I also think a statement that as I go into what the broad experiences that we're offering, all 6th graders will have a band and or choir experience. We want to make sure that they're getting music right away, that they don't make any decisions about whether music is or isn't for them until they've experienced it. From there, we do have some options that we have crafted through some exploratory classes. In the past, we've referred to them as enrichment classes. We've formalized these a little bit more, and you see some of the different options that kids have, from architecture to current events to Minnesota wildlife, as well as in our 8th grade selections, we have Lego Mindstorms, robotics, history day, creative writing, and a comment that really comes up, or a quote that really comes up that we think of in the middle school level. A number of our kids, when they come to school, they may hit a struggle in maybe a band, or maybe a math or reading or science. But we want them to experience not only areas of interests, but also areas that where they may have a strength that they didn't know about. And Sir Ken Robinson once said that instead of trying to find out how smart kids are, we should be finding out how they are smart. And when we see kids hit obstacles and barriers in their, and we see it, sometimes the behavior room that we look at, our reset and restore room, we might focus and hyper focus on the behavior sometimes, when we really need to focus on what got us here. And sometimes for students, they've hit a frustration level and they don't feel successful. And another thing that all of us might be able to remember looking back on our experiences in middle school is, if we're not having a lot of fun, not having a lot of success, we'll find it somewhere. And so sometimes those things are offset by a successful experience in our classrooms. So we're really excited about this. It also has another key function in our building. We've really promoted with our staff having standalone lessons. So the other day I was outside with the science class, they were looking at some Minnesota wildlife and talking through this. And it's amazing, some of the kids who are participating there, we don't see them participating maybe in other classes. But we also, it's a standalone lesson that doesn't necessarily have to have a build upon yesterday, build upon. It's again, allowing us another flexibility within our schedule, which is to have a time during the day within the school day where we can intervene with students who are struggling. So they may miss a class period in the exploratory classes and get a little bit of reading instruction without getting behind. They can still rejoin that class without feeling the stress. But we're getting some really quality and in-depth interventions that I think are going to be incredible at tier 2 in helping us turn the corner and getting the kids to experience success in the classrooms in that area of reading and writing and math and science as well, and social studies. Some Encore classes, these are similar to exploratory. We have wanted in some of these, we wanted all students to be able to, band and choir included. So we have pulled some mini courses that we have, some engineering, some top 20 social emotional learning. And then 8th grade, I'm gonna skip down to 8th grade here, cooking. This was a fun one the other day. Kids were cooking and they were taking our order, more than that, they were not only cooking, but they were taking our orders, they were communicating with us. They had a system that was incredible. I happened to have a gluten-free cookie, which I never would have tried before. I was like, I gotta try this gluten-free one. The gluten-free was actually better than the ones that I like, which are the sugar ones, which I'm kind of a sucker for. So those are some really great things that we're seeing. And then also including some of those life skills like, hey, if you surprise mom and dad or grandma and grandpa with this, it's really not surprising them unless you clean up your mess afterward too. And some of those key life skills that are really important as well. So that's kind of the broad experience piece. This is just kind of talking, rehashing some of the things. 5 key components of secondary reading instruction. We've mentioned earlier, word study and fluency. There's already a lot of focus on vocabulary comprehension and student motivation. We feel like that common language with those areas of focus that I mentioned earlier are going to be key. And then we're on to just refining a little bit with our standard-based grading and reporting. So one of the changes that we see this year is we have kept the same structure in place. Some feedback we got from our public, and this was particularly helpful, is that instead of getting that finalized grade where we look at, A, B, and C, which are certainly have served education for a long time, the changeover to some of the letters in the scanning by standard was confusing when some of those letters don't just naturally pop out. You see an M and it doesn't click in our brains as far as what that means. So we did go to same terminology with one small tweak, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0, so that exceeds and meets kind of stand out. Zeros and ones can kind of stand out. So families, as they look across and help their kids, it just helps those scores and standards sort of pop out in that scanning process a little bit better. So we believe we're going to have an easier time navigating that, and then additional training for staff that's ongoing with Schoology gradebooks to make this kind of come to life a little bit more. So that's a little bit, in terms of highlighting some of the changes. We look at the culture and climate of the building. How can we still provide, safe, welcoming environments and SEL, continue with our positive behavior interventions and supports. We're seeing a great increase in student voice. I could see my meeting schedule already with kids pitching some co-curriculars. We're really trying to work on some other passions outside of the school day, like how do we get a guitar club going and some of those other things where we maybe have lost some of this programming, but we're going to add back opportunities for students that are coming to us through student voice. And then just looking at all students and how we make every single student feel included, and so that everyone gets to grow academically, socially, and emotionally without having to leave a piece of who they are at home. So that's the piece of culture and climate that's important and continued area of emphasis. My favorite parts, the pictures, kids in action here. You see, everything from our band to classroom discussions to art taking place, and kids doing a great job of really getting the year kicked off in a positive way. It's seen a lot of smiles. And one notable thing, last year, I want to recognize our band and choir people for really making a tough situation as good as it could be. I'm super excited and happy for both Mimi and Matt for seeing them back in action with the choir and with the band fully intact. Really, really exciting there as well. Moving on here, Tiger Tune-Up. is something that is one of our interventions during the day, and MTSS, one of our big rocks, with the different areas I mentioned when we can pull kids to intervene. And that we have more formal process to our PIT team, which is a part of our MTSS, and then just getting intentional support out to students and families, and having it built within the school day and the master's schedule is a key to that, so that we have flexibility in doing that. And then operations, nothing real new here in terms of what we're focusing on, effective and efficient processes, and building level teams, safety and that sort of thing. And there's a balancing act of how do we focus on learning, focus on the safety of our students and mitigating the spread of COVID-19, and then still providing all the different learning opportunities that we have. So the operations piece there as well. And the building looks beautiful as it, I wanted to get that picture in there. Our custodial staff has done an amazing job. So you see our compass there and the shiny new floors that are still even a little bit shiny with 2 weeks of kids in the building. So with that, I know I flew through a lot of information, wanted to pause if there were some questions and things that I spoke to that you want either some elaboration on, or anything that maybe wasn't clear that I covered.
How often do they rotate those? I don't know, enrichment or whatever. How often do they change? How many opportunities a year do they have?
Great question. Yeah, so the students who take those, they have 3 different, so if they're not in band and choir, they would have a trimester rotation. So they'll have a trimester of each. So they have 3 different exploratory opportunities
Okay.
in there. And then a couple of them have kind of divided it, like current events is kind of a current events and sort of tracking the patterns that you see in current events and where else we've seen them throughout history, to kind of just show kids how cyclical history is. So there's a little bit of back and forth between the past and present there. So there's, in that case, you're kind of breaking up a class is kind of like 2 mini classes within one. So some variation there, but for the most part, 1 per trimester.
So in 6th grade, they don't get that because they're both in band and choir at 7th and 8th.
Correct. Yep. Yep.
And then do teachers share the teaching of those? Or they come up with some ideas, or how does that work?
They do, yes. So our staff has come up with, some topics, and they've looked, at how do we make what we're learning in our core subject areas come to life in some reasons. So we have staff rotating. So there are 3 cohorts of kids that kind of rotate through that, and 3 teachers who sort of shuffle that, so that teachers can teach the same course 3 times. It does reduce the amount of preps they have, which we think is really important as well, since that helps them specialize in areas too.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Charlie?
I think it's just important that we acknowledge the fact that Charlie is in his 2nd year in the principalship. His first year coming on board was last year, and one of the more challenging years of a school administrator in history, and he did an amazing job and continues to grow in his leadership, and we're so appreciative of what he's doing and the staff over at the middle school. I want to acknowledge, the student assessment numbers on the MCAs. I mean, that's hard to see because we've prided ourselves in being one of the top schools in student achievement in the state of Minnesota, certainly in central Minnesota. Last year, during the difficult year of in school, out of school, many students choosing to stay home they had that option to go full-time distance learning. Some students doing the hybrid, so students in and out, quarantined, not quarantined. We definitely saw the effects of that, and honestly, the more I talk in the circles of superintendents and other different folks, you still kind of scratch your head as to why we had those state assessments, given that the year that we had, but we did, and those are the results. All we can do is dust ourselves out, and we say, okay, we know we're better than that, and our staff's working their tails off, and we just think that isn't an accurate reflection of who we are, and it's hard to see regardless. Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you so much, Charlie.
Thank you.
Our next item is ESER 3.
Just so you know, we have an attachment wrong that should be under COVID.
I wonder about that.
They're kind of conversation together. Jessica's gonna start us off with a presentation of what we're looking at here.
A whole bunch of stuff. Ben, I did share this with you, so you could pull it up on that computer.
Okay, and I think just to set the stage, are you gonna set the stage? So you are, right?
We can tag team the stage. What do you want to say?
Well, okay,
Mhm.
we, you know, when the federal COVID relief dollars came, there's been different segments of that. And in education, they call it ESSER. So there was an ESSER 1 allocation and an ESSER 2 allocation. And now just most recently in the last federal, I guess, decision-making, allocated dollars called ESSER 3, and of course allocated to all kinds of different entities and parts of our country, but an allocation to schools where then would go to each state's Department of Education, and they would allocate that out to each school districts on whatever formula they use. I would assume it had to do with student enrollment. But they did use, I think, quite a bit of information related to free and reduced lunch and poverty level in different communities. So certain communities in the state that had higher poverty levels would have received probably more than communities with less poverty. So that's how that's allocated. But with any kind of federal allocation of dollars, there comes a long list of, I guess, what's the right term? Accountability measures and lots of different processes that need to be in place for us to be able to get an application approved with the federal government. And one of those things is to get lots of public input and to be able to share some information out. So Jessica and Michelle's here to share kind of our first go at sharing where we're at right now, but we're not complete with that process.
I will say ESSER 3, it is an emergency fund from the federal government, specifically to address the lost time that students had away from learning last year. So across the nation, students are experiencing less learning last year than is the norm. As Ben said, that's difficult for us to take, even though it makes logical sense that if students are not here with us, they will not learn as much, but we feel a great responsibility to students thriving in multiple ways. So there's their social, their emotional competencies, their mental health, and of course their academics. We feel great responsibility about that. And so it is difficult to see in numbers what that translates to Princeton for our students. As we look at that, I can't help but notice some bright spots in the data, because there are some things we need to notice went very well, and some silver linings. I think most important of the story is, what is our action plan next to support students in all those ways? So ESSER funding is not just for academics, it is to support the whole child. So it is to look at their emotional well-being, their mental well-being, and their academic performance. So it's a two-pronged approach. School districts are required to do a deep dive into the data regarding academics as well as the other measures. But while we are doing that data and looking at the numbers for our students, we are simultaneously responsible for reaching out to different stakeholder groups for an input, more in an informal way. What are the students you are connected to, or the other stakeholders that you are hearing from, and what are the effects on their students that they're reporting? So at the end of this, kind of a share out of where we're at and what our action plan is so far, I'll also ask for what you're hearing and seeing, both from your own perspective as well as what you are hearing from your stakeholders. So I have way more information in these slides than you might be ready for, but let's go bite by bite. So it is across the nation, $1.2 billion account we're allocated based on our Title I funding. So based on how many students we have in Princeton who qualify for free and reduced lunch is the parameter they use for determining what our allocation is here. All of the funding is to be used in response to COVID-19. So it is for health mediation, for mental health mediation, and for academic mediation. So what is the effect to us? 80% of the allocation can be used for general expenses. 20% of the allocation must be used specifically to address that lost learning time. So the strategies that you use or that costs the budget dollars we invest have to be specifically targeted to for that purpose.
Yeah,
Healthy.
You just gotta tell me when to.
Oh,
You
I'm
wanna go to the
clicking on my screen and not noticing. I'm on slide 3. 2 more clicks. Sorry, Ben. A healthy reminder, 2 years ago, we engaged in a process to establish for Princeton Public Schools and the community what are our priorities for our children. So this document here called Habits of a Tiger was a culmination of teacher input, student input, business input, parent input, community input on what we agree is the most important things for our students. So Habits of a Tiger, we want as a system, our pre-K through 12th grade system, we want students to exit our system as critical thinkers and positive leaders who are continuously refining their communication skills, their own self-awareness, and their empathy for others. That is often embedded within academics. Sometimes it is alongside our academics. So overall data for the district, this is what our trend lines look like. This is separated by grade level so that we can see how each grade level is performing. This is specific to reading. So you will notice that reading is decreasing across grades. Ben, your photo there is right over the end mark. So this year's data. What I do need to point out for you here is grades 3 through high school are the ones who test for MCAs. So those are the ones that are represented by this data. Not every grade level is tested, but all of the grade levels are trending down with one very clear exception. I also need to point out that our younger learners who were tested need more supports in reading than our older learners. So that makes sense that students who are less independent needed to be with teachers more. So in this shuffle between home and school and some days off, that's where we see the bigger dip in the learning. Notice that there is one trend line that is actually trending upward despite a global pandemic, and that is our reading performance for our high school students. So not only is that trending upward through the pandemic, I think it is worth noting that it went up so much last year that we met reading goals if it would have been a normal year. So we had growth to a level that is worth acknowledging. And it was with a cohort of students that historically had been trending behind others. So that group of kids made a giant leap. Math data is the next slide. And 6th grade is where we need to make sure that we're providing additional supports. To the biggest degree, I think worth noting here are 3rd and 4th graders. So those that will need the most support in reading skills were actually the highest in the math skills. And so that helps us then prioritize by grade level where we focus our efforts. It is required both for ESSER 3 funding, if you'll go to the next slide, Ben, as well as for our World's Best Workforce, which is something you're very familiar with our report annually, that because we have 2 populations that are typically have a gap between our average population and them, we do need to track their performance and provide supports accordingly. So our 2 groups that we report on annually are students who qualify for free and reduced lunch, and then students who qualify for special education services. You will see that gap exists and persists What is worth noting is that it did not widen, which is the case for many districts. So although we are not happy with that gap and we did have a decrease in learning, what is worth noting is that the gap did not widen for that group. That is also true if you'll go to the next slide, Ben, with math. The following slide shows our students who qualify for special education services. A similar story there. You will notice that our gap persists. It did not widen. You'll note on the bulk of these slides, in fact, all of them, the data historically has been trending up through 2018. And then what makes it difficult for us to look at is, and I'm still on the slide before that, what makes it difficult to look at is that when the pandemic hit in 2019, that's where we're seeing that decrease. That is not fun to look at. Some more items that are worth mentioning in terms of relative good news, if you will go to the next slide, Ben. This shows specifically our high school student performance. And you will notice that in reading, math, and science, we are above state average in all three measures. Good news there is these are the students that are closest to entering the workforce and society. And so you don't want to have to choose a student group, only one student group to perform highest, but it is heartening to see that our high school students will have the skills that they need to enter the workforce. Next slide would show middle school. This slide, the data starts to get a little fuzzy only because we have data for our school in terms of those three grade bands. The state does not differentiate, so you can't grab what did the state 6th through 8th graders do. You can only grab what did all students do, so just statewide. And so these numbers, for example, reading at 55.4% for our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders is compared to students at all grade levels across the state. Intermediate. And then primary does not have, we don't do state testing on small children. What we do is a running benchmark test, we call it, each year, 3 times a year, to progress monitor what our students are learning and where they're at. And so this shows you that compared to 2019 data, we have students do need more support in both reading and math than in a typical year. All right. So what is our approach? I did put this slide in here because we like to take a common sense approach first and foremost, and that is to treat students as whole people, not just little academics, right? And so we do remind ourselves this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you start at the bottom, all humans need food, shelter, water, some physical and physiological needs. Above that, they need to feel safe. Above that, they need to feel a sense of belonging, and that is where academic learning begins, above that. And so we are very deliberate about making sure that we have wraparound services to support students in terms of meals, in terms of clothing if they need it, and other supplies. We are very deliberate about safety measures in our schools. And then I personally, and I hope all staff, take great pride in building a sense of belonging. So making sure that students feel loved here, feel like school is a place where they belong, they have connections, they know that they can be successful here. That is something that we work deliberately to create. And I do have the next slide that shows in terms of how we fare across the nation. We deserve to be proud of that. So Dr. Mark Brackett is an expert in student or human development and emotion. And we did some professional development at the beginning of last year about students being able to voice their emotions and how important that is to identify what I'm feeling and before they could possibly regulate those feelings or know what to do next about them. One of the statistics Mark Brackett brings up from studies across the nation is that students, about 33% of students in our society believe that there is someone at school who cares about them, which is shockingly low. 33% of kids believe someone at school cares about them. That is one of the questions that Minnesota Department of Education asks our students through a student survey. And so we have live data on what our students feel. And you will notice that compared to the nationwide average of 33%, we are at 88%. It doesn't feel like all yet. And it is significantly different than what is most students experience across the nation. All right. So what is our approach? We do take a common sense approach. We talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs before we talk about academic needs. We prioritize infusing social and emotional content and well-being for ourselves and our students alongside academics. We do hold high expectations for our students' learning, which is part of what helps them learn. And we do have created action plans at each site as well as the district level of how we will approach this learning loss. And know that even given best efforts, every plan will be imperfect. And so we will monitor and adjust. We do know, sorry, Ben, a couple slides yet. There, one more. Strategies that most accelerate student learning. So when we are helping them directly with their academics, we know there are a couple of things that work very well to speed up learning in any year. One of them is what we be very clear with ourselves and our students about what we're trying to teach them and have them master as we're teaching it. So they know what we're doing with this hour today. They know what we're doing this week to help you learn. And that instead of panicking about all of the things they might have missed last year and trying to review and give them everything they missed, we prioritize what must they know and be able to do to be successful, and what must I teach them right before that so they can learn it. So you don't do huge chunks of review, you do what is called just-in-time review or just-in-time mini lessons so that they can be successful with grade level content. Spiraling through the most important strategies, so having them read a lot, having them write a lot, having them think through mathematical reasoning a lot, and spiraling, practicing those same skills over and over helps them learn faster. As well as asking analysis level questioning, meaning how do you know? What's the difference? What do you notice? That is how students and humans in general make meaning of the content for themselves. I do want to highlight one other thing. If you will forward then to a slide that says Summer Tiger Academy, it has a tiger and a sun. There is something that we piloted this summer that has up to this point been in our practice, but perhaps not as deliberate in our practice as we wanted it to be. So Summer Tiger Academy is a time when we get to invite our students who are most behind their peers at grade level to have extra learning in the summer. So we're very deliberate about that time is fun and engaging, so they love a school. And we're also very deliberate about most highly effective practices in continuous doses. So what we did differently this summer, we did invite our students that were farthest behind when we did our diagnostic testing. So we did a series of tests with each student, so 20 minutes a piece, just listening to them sound out words, listening to them separate sounds, watching them decode or sound out words in reading and print. And instead of organizing students by grade level or age, we organized students by skill they needed to work on. And then we taught them that. We had unbelievable success, most clearly in 3rd and 4th grade. So if you will remember from our data and our slides where we needed to make sure that we're very deliberate this year about reading instruction was 3rd and 4th grade. And so that is why I wanted to share with you the success. So if you will forward one more slide, Ben. This might be some academic lingo to you, but what you need to notice here is this is a diagram of one child. So I chose one. It's not that this only happened with one. This is representative of what happened with students in grades 3 and 4 who needed to work on specific skills. So this is a continuum. Each line on this graph shows a different reading skill. So the first one is, can the student decode CVC words? That would be like cat. It has a consonant, a vowel, and a consonant. Can they decode digraphs, which are combinations of letters, or blends, which is like B and L together? And it gets more and more complex as you go down the chart. So each one of these rows is a very significant reading skill. Typically, a student could master one of those, like CVC words. Often kindergartners do, but for sure first graders would be working on CVC words and digraphs. And then second grade would kind of overlap. So 1 or 2 rows per grade level would be a typical progression. So this student that I chose when we began Summer Tiger Academy, the different skills there, you'll notice the pretest was 3 out of 10 on the first one, 0 out of 10, 0 out of 10, 0 out of 10. In 14 days of instruction, direct, systematic, explicit instruction in what this child needed, that student scored 8 out of 10, 10 out of 10, 8 out of 10, and 2 out of 10. So caught up 2 grade levels in terms of the skills she was missing. It's very heartening when you bring that information to teachers and they say, share with me what this is. I want to do this with my class. And that is what is in the works currently. So that brings us to our action plan and how we are moving forward given where we are at. So action steps that are already in progress are grades K through 2. And again, I'll remind you, the younger grades need more support. And the students seem to need less support as they get older. That K2, we're prioritizing what we teach in our reading block, and we are very much following the science of reading. In that number 2, 100% of our classrooms will utilize sound walls, and all teachers are like embracing this training and beginning to already embed it in their classrooms in week, what are we at? 3. Grades 3 through 4 are leveraging what we learned over summer and implementing that in their classrooms. Grades 3 through 5 are working intentionally to embed additional writing practice. And the last one there, we have offered science of reading letters training to say, would anybody volunteer to do this very intensive 32-week course in how to teach reading? And we have 24 of 100 teachers volunteer off the bat. So whenever you offer something to people, you'll have early adopters. Normally that's about 10%. We have 24% who jumped on and said, take me. Next page, Ben. We are also intentionally working with our math coach to make sure that we are clear across grade levels K through 6. What are the priorities for our math instruction? We are embedding authentic literacy strategies in K6 or 6-12, and then K-12, 2 things are happening: that analysis level questioning and our mapping of our essentials so that we're all on the same page. These are the district-wide action steps. You will note that sites have additional action steps that are specific to their grade levels and students. Will you go to the next slide, Ben? So again, we have data, we have a plan, there is additional emergency funding above the plan. And so knowing what our data is, knowing the plan we already have in action, and knowing we have some opportunities and some funding to do additional steps, it's our job to look at where are those hotspots and consult with stakeholder groups on what they're learning from their perspective, what's happening with students or any specific student groups. So I will ask you, for any input that you have now, but it certainly doesn't have to only be tonight. This can get your thinker thinking, and as stakeholders approach you, that's certainly information that would be welcomed. So the questions for you, what are you seeing and hearing about how the pandemic is affecting our students? And when you put that in perspective of our vision of developing in every learner the ability to succeed in an ever-changing world, what do you see as some needed supports that we need to be aware of?
So Jess, if they don't have anything, just, and they might, and so.
You might
I mean,
and you might not yet.
You know, what would be the best, you know, because we're gonna wanna to get feedback from all of our constituents. You know, all of our parents and, you know,
There certainly
setting
will
up
be a
systems
parent
for,
survey.
so that we can survey information and opportunities.
Yep.
But now that you're talking to the board, what's the best way for them to get information to you?
So the feedback mechanism that I'll ask you to engage in, as well as when we do those stakeholder surveys, that you would participate there. But I think right now, I just want to know if there are things you've already heard. If you come up with things later, certainly my email would be the best way to make sure that that gets included in the analysis.
I don't know if it's necessarily what I've heard, but I'm of the belief that a lot of kids will make big jumps. But next summer, will that ESSER money be available to help that group? Because we're gonna have a group that's like whoop, and then the rest will march through, and then there's still gonna be, I mean, we just know that there's still gonna be, will that ESSER funds be available for that? And that would be my input.
Yep, ESSER funding is available to us for the next 3 years,
Okay.
but it's one chunk. We decide how fast we use that.
Okay.
There is additional funds available specifically for summer programming.
Okay.
So that will be something we are able to continue.
After your presentation and the previous presentation, it seems to me that last year was just a lost year with the scores and that, to Sue's point, I would expect that I've experienced in my own household that as far as math and reading, as they go down, hopefully by this time next year, we'll see a spike going up, because I mean, it's pretty obvious to me, the correlation between last year with distance learning, hybrid learning, kids not being in the classrooms, that it was very detrimental to our students.
I would say definitely more learning happens when our kids are with us.
Absolutely. I mean, they didn't have the resources to bounce questions off of teachers as much as they would normally. So am I concerned about the test scores a little bit, but I'm assuming, which, you know, that phrase about assuming, but I would think that by this time next year, we should be able to see an uptick.
In an average day, like at the primary school, how much time is devoted to math? How much time is devoted to reading?
Reading is 120 minutes, so 2 hours of their day. And then math is 90 minutes, so an hour and a half. I would say additional math and reading happens outside of those times as well, like a whole group read aloud type of thing. But yeah, that we are very deliberate about blocks of time for those two separate areas.
I imagine there are breaks within there too, for attention.
Yep.
And you think that time is sufficient?
I do.
Are there national numbers to compare our scores to? I mean, we have the state, but I would be.
I do not currently have that, but I can find out.
Well, no, the assessment is
Would
based
just
on
be for
Minnesota comprehensive
Minnesota,
assessment. So just Minnesota, and every state,
Has their
every
own.
state has their own test.
That's true.
Some
But they
states
probably
have-
reading and-
Probably a few states have more rigorous tests. Most states have less rigorous tests. But yeah, this would be compared to our own state of Minnesota, other than that K-1-2 data that you saw that was fast. You know, I'm sure they would have some national data, because that assessment could be done in any state.
Well, also just in response, Eric, I mean, yes, we would hope we would see that, and we can't wait until this time next year to measure that. So it'll be very important that we know where kids are at as we go.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the academy, I had no idea. Did you know we were doing that? I didn't know we were doing that. I think that's great. Should I have known? I probably should. Probably. okay.
I knew it was happening. I didn't know of the details that Jessica just told us about.
You know, in relation, you know, a lot of the planning and the action steps that Jessica explained, a lot of that ESSER funds or no ESSER funds,
Right.
like, we're moving forward.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think that, you know, okay, we're fortunate enough to have an allocation in the ESSER $3 that can be, I believe it's a little bit over $2 million in the ESSER $3 that is allocated to our school district that, you know, we need to budget out for the next 3 years. And how do we use those dollars to target learning loss over that time? And what's the best utilization of those dollars? You know, and one thing that I think that, you know, that is going to be important too in the consideration of that is just, you know, trying to maintain a very respectable class size so we don't have too many students, you know, to ratios of students to teachers. You know, we do believe that if we have, you know, better ratios, that we can, you know, one teacher can touch more students at a time. You know, that's something that we'll have to consider, as well as all kinds of other, you know, interventions. But that's what we're gonna need to have feedback from the public on is, okay, we get these dollars, what's the best utilization of that in terms of their input?
I think that students were able to choose to not participate. And I don't mean that they didn't attend their class, but it was easier to step back if you're somewhat of a reluctant learner, which I have some experience with. And so having them with someone who keeps them going, and if there's a way to funnel those funds so that they have, they don't have that opportunity to step back, but are re-engaged again.
Now, did you say that during the day there's a pullout for extra tutoring, for example, in reading or math, where kids can be pulled out of other activities and be tutored specifically if they're lacking in something?
Yeah, so what we call tier 1 instruction, so regular classroom instruction is what we are adjusting to make sure that we're providing the supports the kids need. There are students that are behind so the whole class is behind, right? But then there are some students who are behind the class, and those are the students that would receive that type of extra support as well. Yes, so we have Title I services and ADSIS, which are specific interventions with kids.
Are these paras who work with the kids or?
It's a variety of licensed teachers and then some para support. The ones that are with paras, the teacher does the diagnostic, what does the student need, and this is the matching thing, so.
Is it individual or small group?
It depends on the situation, some of each.
Well, I think Charlie spoke to some of that too, as far as making sure your schedule is flexible enough where you can build that into the day if a student needs that.
Jess, are you done with this? Okay.
All right, any other questions before we move on?
Thank you, that was
Very good.
quite informative.
All right, COVID budget update.
So I'm going to continue with the discussion of ESSER 3 and all the other ESSERs and specialized funding. The top part of this chart that's in our board packet is all the money that we received last year, and as you see, we've received it. It's expended and was all part of the budget. So we're gonna last year's budget. So I'm gonna move on and talk a little bit about ESSER 3. So as Ben indicated, we have received over $2 million. It's almost closer to 3 when you add the two pots together, but there's one pot that's 2.2 million. the initial thought there is that's the pot that we can use to maintain operations. So we don't have to do deep reductions into our class sizes. So we can maintain our guidelines kind of thing. Plus, we are also finding out we're gonna have more costs in testing and probably mass supplies, things like that, than we initially anticipated. Because parents are appreciating the fact that when their kids have symptoms, we basically are helping them out with here's a test to take home and test, and then the child can come back right away. So there'll be some expenses there. So that 2.2 million, we will be leveraging in that way as much as possible. But that 551,000 is what Jessica's been talking about tonight. That all needs to be used to target that learning loss. So some of the things that will fall under that we did this last summer, actually, with some of our summer money, was summer school busing, targeted services with extended day busing. So we typically do busing or targeted services after school. I believe that's usually Tuesdays and Thursdays. So we want kids to be able to attend that and be able to get home. And so we're going to give the option of parents doing that. And then we will need paras to help with, we don't want the kids going straight from school, our normal school day, into this extended day. So we're going to have snack and playground time so they can unwind a little bit. And then we'll bring them back in with the teacher. And timing wise, then our second tier buses, our first one should be in to take them home. So these are some of the thoughts on some of the things that this money could be used for in order to help parents have their children attend these different things that we come up with. The other thing we talked about was summer camps in partnership with community ed. We found out in the updated guidance that has come out in the last couple weeks, there's been webinars that we've attended that we will not be allowed to do that. So that one will have to take off for sure, or we'll have to find a different way to do camps. Teaching and learning materials, there's different interventions that come with core curriculum. And of course, everything costs money, and we definitely want to have the materials that are needed for the interventions that our teachers come up with to teach our kids. So we've got a start on the ESSER 3 thought process. We will come hopefully in October with a more comprehensive budget of what that will look like. Most of ESSER 3 will be in the 22-23 school year and the 23-24 school year. So it'll affect summer of 22, summer of 23, and summer of 24, but it won't affect the 24-25 school year. By that time, all of the money will have been expended. ESSER 2 summer school, that is the pot of money that we use this summer to provide busing and additional paras, things that we typically do not have in our typical targeted services summer school. So that's an estimate right now of 62,000. So they expect that we should get an updated number in November, as long as our Mars data is up to date at that point. So we'll have more information. We did receive 15,000 up front, and we have spent about 30,000 of that 62,000. The American Rescue Plan. This is 92,000 is targeted toward mental health. We were having a little bit of a tough time of getting answers on how we could spend this money. So we finally just put in a budget and said, well, we'll see if they approve approve it because we wanted to provide mental health services after school and during the summer. I will tell you though, in the mental health world, $92,000 probably won't go very far. You know, you need psychologists and people trained, and it's not a cheap endeavor. So, but it will provide additional mental health services, and we'll have more on what we think that will look like also in October. We were also able to offer preschool summer school this summer. That came in, as you remember, right at the end of last May. As we were walking out the door, they said, oh, by the way, here you go. There were schools that turned this money down. We did not. We had a wonderful coordinator who just jumped up and down getting kids into that program. She had 15 that attended, which is really good because a preschool classroom is capped always at 10. So this next one, COVID-19 testing relief, that just came in. We haven't received this money, and I don't know quite the end date of this money, but most of this money will be spent at the end of this year. So we are going to be buying testing supplies. Testing supplies will end up to be quite expensive. We're targeting about 100,000. And then we're looking at hiring a staff person, COVID testing, what did we call this, health secretary kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, that will be basically ordering the test, helping coordinate all of that, tracking the tracing, to give us some relief in our offices, because it's just overwhelming. So we anticipate that will be spent out in just those two areas. ESSER 2 is part of the 21-22 budget, and we had planned to use that as our offset for our planning for this year, and are currently working on the revision of what that might look like, because it will be all part of the revised budget. But the intent is that those teachers that we're hiring right now to bring down class sizes is what we're using that for. The teachers we kept last year in our younger grades are part of that. Our health aide is part of that we hired. We also have an RN at the high school level instead of a health aide, an actual RN nurse, so that qualifies. And then at the high school level, we're looking at MTSS instruction, which Jessica can probably tell you more of that, but that would also qualify under that ESSER 2 because it's very clear multi-tiered systems of support is listed as one of the state's priorities. So the homeless consortium, that actually was ran through Elk River, and that extended mental health services to our homeless population here in Princeton. And that money is expended as of September 30th. It's done. And then we did get another pot of homeless money direct that arrived hopefully Friday, which means Ben's got to click a button. But that is estimated at 24,961. So it depended on some of the smaller districts had to join a consortium and make a decision. So that pot of money may go up. But again, that is directed toward the homeless population and probably would go toward the mental health piece. Child care, we received 22,200 from different pots of money last year. And then currently there is a block grant out there that Gwen and her team is applying for, and I'm not sure what that all means yet. And then there's another piece coming toward us. They said that those numbers we would be looking at in probably 4 to 6 weeks, that they should have some numbers. If you recall, there's been some stuff out in the news about enrollment, declining enrollment aid. Well, that aid is actually coming from the federal stimulus, and that's one time. So that will also come in as some type of grant. So there is definitely movement in all of this federal money and the different areas that are coming at us. So, and of course, with that, there are different auditing standards and accountability that we have to maintain. And we're actually working through that right now with our current audit from last year's. I just had to prove that we had it at the board level. All that documentation went through you at the board level, and I sent that on to her today. And that we always have to put in an application that says how we're going to spend the money. And then that has to, what we're spending on the money on has to match that. So we're working through that process, and we typically do that always with title and federal, any federal money. So food service has federal money, title has federal money, that's all federal. But we have now expanded to quite a bit of federal money over the next couple of years. So,
Well, the interesting thing is we're not used to getting federal money.
no,
I mean, we don't, any given year, 1%, 2 or 2% of our revenue comes from the federal government, you know, and now with relief stimulus packages and those kinds of things, you know, we are working with federal dollars, and it's very unique. But, you know, and with that comes with lots of different requirements that come with those dollars. And that's what, you know, Michelle's taking you through all of the different line items. And every one of those line items take, you know, I don't know how many countless hours of work of reporting and applications and accountability measures, really.
Any questions for Michelle? All right, how about the levy?
the levy, this is normal work. Every year in September, we have to approve a levy. So the first part of this is just what the levy looks like. We have a $228,000 increase, which is about 2.85%. There isn't, you know, we have increases, the biggest increases in our total general education levy. And, you know, it's just kind of all little increases all over the map. It's all, most of it's formula driven, local optional, you know, went from up 50,000, long-term facility maintenance went up 40. Let's see, post-employment benefits went up some. So by the time you put all these little increases in each of these categories, you've increased a couple $100,000, but it's based on, you know, all the formulas that the state of Minnesota sets, and there was no major changes in the levy from last session. Community ed went down, and a big part of that was a catch-up payment from basically, you know, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. In the special ed area, basically Tiger Club, we received funding for that through the community ed levy. We like to keep that flat, you know, around that $100,000 mark, but we did have a spike in it, and so we received that money last year for this school year, even though we spent it a couple of years ago. And then, of course, we have the general debt area, which typically that's our house payment, and we have to have 5% above what our payment is for delinquent taxes that don't come in, so we make our bond payments. So that usually goes up a little bit. I will tell you that I do not anticipate this 2.8% really increasing our basic property taxes in the Princeton School District, because our taxable market value has increased. So, and it's increased a little bit more than typical, and I don't have that number right in front of me. I was gonna write that down before, but we've had some growth in the area, so then of course the spread goes out a little bit more, so the 2.85 impact is it's not as noticeable on taxes. Now, that being said, if we pass the referendum, that referendum would be already on this levy. So we would start paying in 22 on that, the taxpayers. So we would have a totally different levy in December than what we have right here for debt service.
That's- Any questions about that? All right, we have a couple action items tonight. The first one is we need to set our truth and taxation meeting for December 21st at 6 p.m. I'm assuming it would be right at the beginning of our regular work session. So somebody wants to make a motion to make a, okay. Motion's been made by Eric. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Jim. Any other comments or questions about that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. That is set. Then the levy that we just heard about from Michelle.
We are setting the maximum levy. We don't put a dollar amount in at this point, and the reason we do that is for calculation. The state of Minnesota does all the calculations, and they continue to calculate until and catch errors all the way up until October. I think October 7th is their cutoff when they have to have it to the counties. So that's typically what that is. And also in this situation, we are going out for a bond referendum, so we would not want to have a hardcore number in there because we have trouble with the debt service end of it.
Well, we're actually setting the final levy at
In
our truth and
December.
taxation
No.
in December. So all we need is a motion to accept the levy resolution as presented.
Just real quick, though, the resolution doesn't have a percentage, it has a hard number.
Well, I have the dollar amounts and then the word maximum. It's the same resolution we pass every year.
You gonna make a motion then?
Sure.
Motion made by Eric. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Sue. Any other comments or questions? This is a resolution, so we'll vote by roll call, starting with Jim.
Yes.
Don?
Yes.
Sue? Yes. Yes? Eric?
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Last item for business here is a resolution relation to appointing election judges and absentee ballot board members. What is this one?
Okay, so we have to have a minimum of 3 election judges at each polling site, so we have 6 sites. New since our last election is that the absentee ballots have to be counted by a separate board. So we have to have 2 people at a minimum do that. And since this is not a major state election, we will only need 2, but they will verify the signature on the absentee ballot envelope to the form inside and say whether that ballot is valid or not. And they will actually look at that weekly, and then the 2 members that are on that board will count the ballots the night of the election after 8 o'clock.
Princeton Township's not on here.
I believe they go to Greenbush. That's a combined polling place. We have 6 combined polling places.
So when it's not a national election. they can-
Yeah, correct. Correct, and I will say that the election, finding election judges this time was a little harder than in the past. We called a lot,
No.
so, but we finally got there.
All right, any other questions? Would somebody like to make a motion to accept the resolution relating to appointing election judges and absentee ballot board members for November 2nd, school district special election as presented?
So moved.
Okay, motion's been made by Sue. Is there a second?
Yeah.
Second by Dawn. Any comments or questions on that? That's also a resolution, so we'll vote by roll call, starting with Dawn.
Yes.
Sue?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Resolution is passed. We have no additions to the agenda. There are a few future meetings here listed, but I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion's made by Eric, second by Jim. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.